Hello everyone, I'm Tony Johnson. Welcome to the Crosswind PM Evolution broadcast, an opportunity for you to get professional development units to evolve your project management career. We're getting ready to get started shortly here. If you haven't done so already, click subscribe so anytime we do updates you get notified and you can continue to evolve your project management career because we never stop learning. Get ready and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you. Now, the key topics we will be addressing: Pmp Exam updates, including a little bit of history about the past so you can kind of recognize the current. We will be talking a lot about the standard for project management and Pmbok Guide 7th edition, which are actually two books in one, or two books published together, I guess is a good way to say it. We'll talk about Standards Plus a little bit, and then any other questions and, table talk, if you will. Also, as we're getting started, type in the city, state, country you're in so we can get a feel. In the two of these we've done, I think we've had at least 3 countries represented. So I love seeing that lightning bolt fly across the planet like it is. Okay, so we are going to have some foundation points as we get started here. And let me say, the bulk of this presentation, I intend to have it be about 7th edition Pmbok Guide. But I have given this presentation at various PMI chapters and various events, and I typically always get asked about the Pmp exam. So we're going to address that piece and get that out of the way to begin with. Then we'll start talking about the mind-blowing 800-some page down to 200-some page PMI standard. So the Pmp certification or credential is accredited by ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, per ISO 17024. Now, the thing is, you could have your brother-in-law say that, oh yeah, I heard PMI does this or that, whatever. The bottom line is ISO 17024 defines the standards that PMI has to work to with the Pmp certification and the Pmbok Guide itself as well, 2 separate standards. Now, ISO 17024, that's a key number. So if you're a geek like me, that's where the bodies are buried, or the DNA is, so to speak. From an exam updates perspective, it's funny. People say, well, I want something for the 2022 exam. Well, here's the deal. Things run in 5-year life cycles. So I've got a graphic here and a slide or two that's going to show you a bit more about how that flows. But starting out, January 2nd, 2021, PMI officially cut in a new exam content outline. And that is a key phrase. That is what the exam is based on. I don't care what anybody says about new Pmbok Guide, Pmp exam. I've written 46 books on this stuff. I live and die and I feed my family by the exam content outline. And when the exam content outline is updated to reflect a Pmbok Guide, that's when I pay attention from an exam perspective. Now, they typically roll in 4 or 5-year cycles, like I'll show you shortly here, but the one that kicked in at the beginning of last year and is still valid in my estimates until late 24, early 25 is People, Processes, and Business Environment. And you'll hear me say that a few times here. It replaces the initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling and closing. And yes, I'm trying to sound monotone and boring because we've heard those for 20 years. They're still valid, don't get me wrong. But People, Processes, Business Environment, those are the bougie domains, as my teenagers would say. And they would say, Dad, don't use the word bougie so much. You look like a geek. Well, People, Processes, and Business Environment are 2021 and beyond project management. That's where it's going. Now, exam updates. As of today, Agile is added. Hallelujah. Some people say, oh my gosh, up to 50% of the tests could be Agile. It is what it is. We could take things like communication channels, how do you deal with change requests, how do you build a team, and I could make a question, and it could be Agile, it could be hybrid, which is kind of the middle between Agile and predictive, or it could be predictive. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know Agile, and if I'm going to be taking the test, or my brother-in-law is, and they don't know Agile, that they've got to go learn Agile. Agile Light is what's needed for the test. That's it. You need to understand the frameworks, the roles, things of that nature. Now, hybrid is a new phrase that is getting more and more popular. Basically, hybrid is a little bit of waterfall, a little bit of Agile. I call it the Lego situation. You give me enough Lego elements, I can connect them however I need to do what I need to do. In fact, I just had a call from one of our corporate customers here in Dallas in the last hour, and he goes, Tony? I said, yes. And he goes, hey, I need a little of your time. I said, yeah. He goes, how many projects should a PM have at one time? I said, that's a loaded question. He goes, I know. And he used the word hybrid with me. And I said, what exactly is that to you? You know, and he gave me his own organization's definition. So here's the deal. Hybrid is kind of like Bigfoot. You know, it's like, well, it exists. Well, I'm not saying Bigfoot exists. There's people that say it exists, but if you said, what exactly is it? Nobody could really tell you. You know, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So you open the toolbox, you put whatever tools you have to use in whatever way it makes sense to accomplish the goals. Now, with hybrid, they could ask you things about tools, roles, artifacts, which are the modern era phrase for documents, and then any other shared concepts, like I said, communication channels, building teams, things like that could go across the value delivery spectrum or value delivery system. So what is this 22 version of the PMP exam, or what it is not? Like we know about scope statements, it's easy to say what it is we're doing. It's a lot harder to say what it is we're not doing. So let's talk about what this is not. The current 22 version of the exam does not reflect the 7th edition Pmbok guide. Yes, PMI.org. If you go to the PMP exam, it does say the Pmbok guide 7th edition is a reference to get ready for the PMP exam. I could all but bet the people that own the credential, Sierra and her staff, I could all but bet they did not give that ad copy to the people that put that on that particular web page, because 6th all of a sudden became 7th. Now, in that context, I'm also going to elaborate in this presentation on a lot of the things that we see in 6 are still in 7. You just got to know where to look. And I want to clarify something. My comment about, Sierra's staff owning the credential, probably not giving the ad copy to the people that updated the page. That's not meant to be a slam on PMI by any means. It's just big organizations, one part doesn't always know that the other part is doing something. That's not a bad thing. It's just the more people involved, the harder it is to maintain control. Now, 7th edition is not in the exam. The ECO does not align with 7th edition. Models, methods, and artifacts that we see in 7th edition, a lot of them are already in 6. So, we'll discuss that before we're done today. Now, the thing is, like one of our PMTA certified training providers, Eric Verjou, and I were talking when 7 came out and they had the performance domains and principles. He goes, you can't test principles on an exam. I'm like, I know. Believe me, I'm getting a headache trying to figure out how you could approach it, so you still got to have processes, as we'll see in this presentation. So with people, you have resources, you have stakeholder, you have communications. And with processes, you have integration, which is pulling things together. You have scope, schedule, cost, quality, risk, procurement. That sounds like knowledge areas, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Now, the graphic you have on the screen, this is the picture is worth 1,000 words. So here is how they have created things in the past and how they do things now. Without getting into a lot of detail, because you guys can read along, but I could turn this into 30 minutes itself. But the blue row represents the steps that PMI goes through to update, for example, a Pmbok guide, a program management standard, an earned value standard, an agile practice standard, things like that. The box at the end, commercial availability, English, and translation. So basically about every 4 or 5 years, they have to see if it is warranted to update a standard. Generally, they do. I think the work breakdown structure, second or third edition, they simply validated that it was still sufficient. But I think all the others I'm aware of, if they have updated them when it comes time, they have done updates, not just said it's good. So that all of a sudden is available, and then, gee, the exam content outline is initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling and closing. Well, if all you've ever done is predictive project management, those are going to be a really good way to measure people on the test. So that dashed line going into the orange box for the ECO. Note, that is before January 2nd last year. Now, the New World Order. Dogs and cats play together. We all get together, again, live, things like that, the New World Order. That's the green row at the very bottom. If you look, the third row or the third box from the left, new exam content outline, then an arrow going into identify reference materials for exam questions. Then that box goes into update exam questions database/forms. Form is what PMI calls a quiz. It's a unique combination of questions. So just because a Pmbok guide can be referenced to create a question doesn't mean that is the only basis for it. Okay. Now let's continue here. So we mentioned every 4 or 5 years there's a new ECO. I don't anticipate until late 24, early 25, they would cut over a new one. They might announce one in early 24, but it typically takes 6 to 10 months to cut in. They did cut over the 7th edition in the summer 2021, 6 months after they started this new ECO. Now, trust me, big organizations don't move fast, and they aren't going to cut over a test and then 6 months later say we need to do a major update for this, especially when they have their own courseware and self-paced things that they're selling and things like that they would have to gut and totally rebuild as well. So that's a whole other discussion. So anyway, then they have never updated anything short of a 4 to 5 year cycle in the time I've done this, in a little over 22 years, I think. And if anybody is not yet certified, or your brother-in-law is getting ready to be, or what have you, they are pretty flexible on the training that counts. If it loosely falls under the spectrum of project management, it doesn't need to be current. As long as you've taken it and can provide a completion cert or some sort of a course outline if necessary for clarification, they generally count it. Okay, so we got a little bit of an interaction here. So please type your answers in chat. The 22 version of the Pmp exam is based on Pmbok Guide 7th edition. True or false? Let me see. Okay, I feel like David Lee Roth when he was in Van Halen, and every time they would go to a city, Alfredo, he would say, this is the best city we've ever been in, because these are as good of answers as we had last week. So, but so yeah, it is what it is. So false. Okay. So the 22 version of the exam is based on the exam content outline. True or false? Let's see the answers. There we go. I'm loving it. Okay. So true. Yeah, the exam content outline is what the exam is based on, and that's generally good for 4 to 5 years per American National Standards Institute, ISO 17024. Okay. Now, a second foundation point before we get to the mind-blowing stuff. So, a guide to the project management body of knowledge, Pmbok Guide, has been approved by ANSI as a standard. Now, to clarify, Pmbok is all project management knowledge. Pmbok Guide is the part of the book that there's a part called the Standard for Project Management. There's a part called the Pmbok Guide. So the guide is an aggregation of work. So it is not everything project management. And let me clarify, it is not meant to serve as an exam preparation tool. It is meant to serve as a standard for considerations about how to do project management. So just a brief, where were we? Pmbok Guide 6th edition, we had 10 knowledge areas, we had 5 process groups, we had 49 processes, we had over 1,440 inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. Oh my God, get them out of here. That's too many. And it was over 800 pages. It was like a Verizon phone book. Actually, the pages were about as thick. Hard to read because it was on that gray copy-proof paper. And the way it worked in the past, when 2000 was in place and third came out, 2000 was outdated. So when they came out with a new version in the past, the previous version was outdated. Now, 6th edition is where the details are, and Standards Plus. And then 7th edition is more the bigger picture view. So I don't want you to feel like we're getting rid of 6. It's just this is where the details are. And it is still relevant. Even once they retire 6, you will be able to find details about it in Standards Plus. And I would assume future Crosswind publications is applicable as well. Okay, now mind-blowing information coming next. Boom! I'm getting ready to throw a lot at you. So, here we go. 7th edition Pmbok Guide. It went on a keto diet. It went from 800 plus pages down to 274. And then the standard itself with the principles was 67 pages. So, a little over 300 pages. And it's in color. Now, you might be going, but like that ShamWow guy. But wait, there's more. Where did all the pages go? Well, you're right. Yeah, they had to go somewhere. That detail is in Standards Plus, which will be at the end of this chapter, and currently in 6th edition as well. So we got rid of knowledge areas, scope, schedule, cost, etc. Gone. Process groups. Well, and the methods, models, and artifacts part of the Pmbok Guide 7. Process groups technically are there, but they're there with a lot of other models. So they're not getting near the visibility that they did in past Pmbok Guides. Processes are gone. Yeah, plan scope management, plan schedule management, define activities, gone. Is there still a schedule management plan? Yep. Is there still a requirements traceability matrix? Yep. So that's part of that methods, models, and artifacts we'll elaborate on. Now, ITOs, give me an oh yeah in chat if you're happy to hear that the ITOs are gone. So the inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs, they're gone. Some could say some of them were renamed, but we'll discuss that. So anyway, Standards Plus, you've heard me say. Now, this matrix that you guys are all familiar with, or colors you might not be, but yeah, this matrix, it is what it is. It's kind of dust in the wind. As far as 7th edition Pmbok Guide, a lot of the artifacts that these processes create are still there, and that's going to be, again, the rest of this discussion. So Pmbok Guide 7th edition, it's no longer thinking about, process groups on one side and knowledge areas down the other. No, we have a standard for project management, and we have the Pmbok Guide, similar to what we've had in the past as far as titles, the 2 pieces that make up the book. But the standard for project management introduces the value delivery system, and it is not just another name for process groups. And it does include 12 principles. And I don't mean high school principles, but I mean 12 principles that you're supposed to try to adhere to in how you do project management. And then the Pmbok Guide includes 8 performance domains, not just another name for knowledge areas. Although some of them you'll see and you'll go, really? Team, and it was called resource before, stakeholder, and it was called stakeholder before. Okay, sometimes you can only slice and dice stuff so much, it is what it is. Now, one other huge piece here, even though it's not super loud, in my presentation, any past Pmbok Guide and this one, 7th edition, are not meant to be prescriptive. Prescriptive is do it exactly this way. Like when I hear somebody say, well, you know, we do the agile methodology. No, there is no such thing as an agile methodology. It is an agile framework. A framework is a loose structure that allows you to be able to do what you need within it to be able to accomplish the desired results. Thus, one point we're going to talk about in this presentation is tailoring as it relates to these 12 principles and these 8 performance domains. So what is a principle? It's something we do. You know, I could beat it to death, but I'm just going to get into the principles when we get to that part of the presentation. But basically, they're underlying approaches that you can take that will be factored into almost anything you do. You know, how they're connected, applied, and used may vary. And then a performance domain is basically, you know, you could call them project activities, you could call them project processes if you're not too caught up in the old names, but they're basically a group of things you do to deliver outcomes and value. Outcomes and value, 2 key words there. And like you see in that third bullet in the second section there, they can be applied with different delivery frameworks and approaches that could be predictive, adaptive, hybrid, which could be anywhere in between there. Now I'm going to keep an eye on chat. So yeah, no knowledge areas, no ITOs. Oh my gosh, yes, exactly. The New World Order. So principles and performance domains work together. So we can see here on the inside, the pinkish area, we have principles. And on the yellow area, we have performance domains. Now you might be going, okay, there's stakeholders in both. There's risk in pink, there's uncertainty in yellow. Isn't that the same thing? Philosophically, yeah. You know, there's team, there's resource, there's stakeholder. You know, there's adaptability and resilience. You could argue the adaptability could tie to development approach and life cycle. So if you think about these principles, you know, these are things that can be applied across these performance domains in whatever context necessary. And then these performance domains, instead of do it exactly in this order, it's going to be however it seems to make sense, you know, based on the value delivery system at the time. Now, we got another question here. You guys didn't know you were going to get a test, did you? So the Pmbok guide is meant to be prescriptive, meaning do it exactly this way. True or false? Boy, howdy, they're answering even faster there than before. Man, they're like the Tampa Bay Lightning goalie. The further we get into this, they just get even better and better. Okay. So false. You knew the answer to that. Okay, so let's see. So the process groups and knowledge areas were renamed to principles and performance domains. True or false? Okay, maybe I didn't do as good a job communicating that there as I could have. So to clarify, these are not just renames. These are not just, it's not just Anthony is now known as Tony. So yeah, so process groups technically are a model, and principles are a whole new thing, and performance domains are not just knowledge areas renamed, even though we could, like an author like me, I could look at a like stakeholder or team and go, yeah, I got some content there to start out that I can modify as applicable because it's got some similarities, yes, but not just a rename, if you will. Okay. So we are going to get into tailoring models, methods, and artifacts, and the 8 performance domains. So let's talk about what tailoring represents. So like 2 weeks ago at PMI Dallas, and by the way, if you're not a PMI chapter member, heck of a value proposition, getting a monthly live speaker, world-class speaker, networking opportunities, etc. But I was at PMI Dallas, and one of our alumni saw me, and he goes, man, Tony, you've lost a lot of weight. Well, I didn't think I'd lost that much, but tailoring would have been needed if I guess if my clothes were too baggy, and I use that as an example. Tailoring is adjusting your processes. I know I said processes are gone, but formally, yes, but call them tasks, call them processes, the workflows that you do, you tailor them to align with what you need the project environment to look like and do. You know, whether it's adaptive, prescriptive, hybrid, which pieces of it you use, in what order, when, things of that nature. So among other things, you know, what can I do to get the best value out there the fastest, be it the cheapest? Like I said, quick delivery, maximizing value, those two kind of, you know, they kind of go together, in that, especially in Agile, you want to be producing things quickly that have value. You know, when we think about regulatory, that could be something that you're required to do. It could be stakeholders you're attempting to satisfy, assuming their needs are realistic. Embracing change. Now, this is interesting. How do we embrace change? Well, in an adaptive environment, we welcome it because we know it's going to happen. In a predictive environment, yeah, that could be a whole other, that could be like a political soap opera for all we know. And so let's see, we got a question there. Tailoring is in both principal and performance domain. Which one does this refer to? You know, this is one of those, I've got multiple perspectives there. I'm going to say it relates to both, but in a different way. In tailoring, from a principal perspective, I would say that's going to be more, what principles do I choose to use as it relates to the variety of performance domains? Like stewardship, you know, you don't all of a sudden today say, I'm going to be a good steward. You know, that's one of those things that's just there. But when it comes to a performance domain, it could come down to, this is how we need to go about getting the work done. Or, you know, this is how we're going to, you know, I don't want to say balance, but apply these performance domains to maximize value. So I think, in my opinion, tailoring the principles is going to be harder to just like put your finger on and go, that's exactly it, because it's kind of like if I said, what's your ethics standards? And you just go, I don't know. I mean, I was raised how I was raised, you know, type thing. But the performance domains, the performance domains, the tailoring there would be a little more obvious, because you might say, we're going to deal with uncertainty before we establish the development approach and life cycle, because we want to make sure we get the development approach and life cycle correct. Versus another scenario, it could be, we know what the development approach and life cycle is, thus when it does make sense to deal with uncertainty, we will. So hopefully that helps. Okay. And I'd like to give a shout out to Alfredo there. He's doing his awesome job as a producer. When that question popped up, he got me feedback about it real quick. So let's see. Now, also tailoring allows you to adjust and adapt to your framework. So Scrum, Disciplined Agile, which PMI owns, Waterfall, sometimes called predictive or prescriptive, even though those aren't exactly the same thing, and what have you. So some of your things you could tailor. Some of the questions the question we had earlier took care of some of this already, but yeah, how much do we know about what we're trying to do? The performance domains that it makes sense to use and in what order, what processes, tasks, workflows, whatever you want to call them. How are we going to engage stakeholders, at what stage, at what time, what tools are we going to use, and what methods and artifacts. Methods and artifacts will be toward the end of this presentation. So, models, methods, and artifacts. Now let me just look ahead just a moment there. Okay, I didn't want to put the cart before the horse. So a model, a method, and an artifact. So MMA, PMI is getting into mixed martial arts. That's a cheesy joke. But a model is a way to do something. So, for example, communication channels, the Tuckman ladder, process groups, those are models. So like last week, I was having a call with a retired soldier that now does mergers and acquisitions. And he's like, yeah, I study this stuff, but I just, man, I don't know what half this stuff is. And he goes, well, Tuckman ladder. And I said, the Tuckman ladder, you know, form, storm, norm, perform, and adjourn. He goes, well, I don't know what the Tuckman ladder is, but form, storm, I do that every day when we acquire companies. I said, well, that's called the Tuckman ladder. So when you look in the back of 7, there's a lot of models back there. You might look at and you go, these were in the Pmbok guide earlier editions throughout the thing. Yes. Or, I didn't know this was called that. You know, so the thing is, these models, methods, and artifacts can be applied in predictive projects, adaptive projects, hybrid projects. It's all that tailoring that comes into play. Methods, the approaches, you could think of them, they have some technique characteristics. If you wanted to really go there, they have some where they feel kind of like what we used to call tools and techniques, but it's not just 100% rename. But you know, benchmarking, decision tree, earned value. Yes, earned value is in 7th edition Pmbok guide. Artifact. Now that's the bougie name for documents. So business case, roadmap, issue log, stakeholder register. Yeah, there's a lot of the documents, you know, like I think we've got a CAPM trainer on the call with us here, and a lot of what she probably recommends in the classroom is like know the process name and the document, at least the main document that gets created. Well, in this case, a lot of those documents that get created, they're in this artifact section. So it's not like, okay, throughout 7, this part of the Pmbok guide creates this document. No, those documents are in the back, and then you can apply them wherever they make sense. They do have some nice tables with some recommendations, but that's a key word, recommendations. So performance domains. Let me monitor questions. We're good? Okay, and then keep an eye on the clock there so I will be here until people drop off, but if somebody does have to get on another call, I do want to at least try to get through things the way we need to in our time. Uncertainty is our first performance domain. Now, you might be going, uncertainty, that's risk. Yes, I agree. Uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity, volatility, risk, basically something that could go differently than expected, good or bad. And yes, it does involve your traditional risk response strategies. The share, exploit, enhance, avoid, transfer, mitigate, escalate, and accept, I believe, I think that's all of them if I remember right. And so they are still there in 7, so it just got rid of a lot of the processes around risk. Now, the development approach and life cycle, I loved this thing when I saw it because it was like, hallelujah, this is like taking the Pmbok Guide 6th edition and the Agile Practice Guide and slapping them together to a great degree. Because what this did, it gives you the ability to go, what do I need to do? Do I need to do predictive? Do I need to do adaptive? What degree of what do I need to do? So you can look at how frequently, some of the guidance that will give you here, how frequently are you producing things, how much do you know about it, what sort of frameworks are you trying to do, and how much uncertainty is there with what you're looking at. Now, if I were putting a new book together about this, in fairness, I probably would have uncertainty right after development approach and life cycle, because whatever my development approach and life cycle is going to be, be it adaptive or predictive or somewhere in between, uncertainty is probably going to, I probably want to be dealing with uncertainty right after it. And that goes back to that question we had about tailoring, for example. Will I provide the chart / replay? We will be recording this and we will be posting it. I will admit, yesterday was Monday and we didn't get done some things that we wanted. Alfredo's shaking his head. So we will push it out. We will push an email out to you guys letting you know when it's been posted. So, okay, stakeholders. Now, one of the biggest things you can do as a project manager is effectively engage stakeholders. So, here it deals with being sensitive to identifying your internal and external stakeholders, and it involves communication. So it actually kind of goes back to old school Pmbok guide, like 3rd edition, where any process that had the word stakeholder in it was actually a communication process because we didn't have a stakeholder knowledge area yet. So stakeholder and communication, we finally got that merger and acquisition of them together again. And then the team, this is pretty straightforward. Yes, focusing on what the team needs to look like, how it needs to come together, how it needs to take shape, and and when we think about, you see the activities and functions, so what steps do you go through to get people on the team, get the team brought together as a whole, and then structure or organization, if you want to think of it like that. And also culture and leadership is a big part of it. One thing we see a lot with this 7th edition Pmbok guide is a lot of soft skill aspects of things. And there are some current Pmp Exam emphasis on the soft skills as well. But that culture and leadership is a big part of things, that team culture, that company culture, if you will. And then people stepping up and being leaders is necessary. Now, planning, you're saying, whoa, Tony, au contraire, mon frere, that sounds like a process group. I agree with you. Here is the deal. Planning is a performance domain. I guess if you're going to do anything as far as those old process groups, planning is probably the one you'd want to keep as a performance domain, because like my dad, Dwayne Johnson, see, I'm Pebble, my dad is Dwayne Johnson, I call him The Rock because, actually my dad's name is Dwayne Johnson, but it's a different one. But like he says, if you plan to fail, you fail to plan. And I figure he's pretty famous because he told me he came up with that, even though I know he didn't. Anyway, planning is big. And it does involve a lot of these knowledge areas. So schedule, cost, resources. If I remember right, there's a little bit of procurement in there and some of that nature as well. So you do need to be sensitive to whatever your approach to planning is going to look like. Project work. So I love this where PMI says we get rid of processes, and then they say establishing what processes you're going to use. It's like, well, okay, you got to understand, some people take these things literally, but this is establishing how the project work is going to be accomplished, or how the project outcome is going to be accomplished. And so you see there, stakeholder communication can be involved, how you manage resources can be involved, procurement, so I'm not going to say this is executing, but, when I think of this a lot. It has a lot of executing characteristics, but please don't interpret that as this is just executing renamed. And then we do embrace change. Again, adaptive, it is what it is, put it on the list. Prescriptive, fill out a change request, and we'll see if it gets approved. Delivery. Now, this is probably my favorite performance domain right after that development approach and life cycle. So scope and quality come together. And I think in part that's probably why it's my favorite, because the people that work in software development and those that are pretty hardcore in quality, over the 20 plus years I've done PMP classes, books, etc., I commonly get asked, well, there's scope and there's quality. I mean, they go together, don't they? Well, one does kind of feed the other. And so here, the focus is on the delivery of the work, the outcome, if you will. And so delivering the value, not just my TPS reports are done. And if that makes no sense, watch Office Space, and it'll either make you laugh or cry. It'll make you laugh like, oh my God, I'm so glad I don't work there. Or if it makes you cry, you might go, oh my God, that's where I work. Feel free to type in chat, you agree or disagree if you've seen the movie. But, we don't, with delivery, I don't care about, well, I made progress on my tasks today. I don't care about, I'm 83% done. I care about, did you deliver? So like if you said to me, delivery, do I care about the team took the ice last night? No. I care about the fact that the goalie took 49 hits, 49 shots on goal, and 0 made it by. and he had 6 out of 7 games. 6 out of 7 series deciding games were shutouts, the last 6 out of 7 for that goalie. That's delivery. And when you can do that as a project manager, even if they lay you off because you make too much money, you won't have a hard time finding a job. Trust me, because you deliver. And the final bullet point I want to emphasize here, especially in an adaptive or hybrid type environment, you recognize that requirements can evolve. So that could mean we get deeper into it, we learn more about it, or it could be just change happens. Change happens. I'm a custodial dad of 2 teenagers. Trust me, if I couldn't embrace change, I'd go crazy, because I have 2 teenagers and they can't plan. Well, one can't plan beyond the tip of her nose. So now measurement. This is where you pull out the tape measure and you go, well, kind of. This is where, again, don't take me too literally, but this is, if we were to try to put processes from past Pmbok guides somewhere, this is where we would have a lot of monitor communication, monitor risk, control procurements, control scope, control schedule. This is where we would have a lot of that. In that, those processes compare what we're trying to do to what we're doing for whatever the particular subject is, so we know if we're on track or not. So again, don't translate, oh, that's monitoring and controlling. But if we were to try to fit, the most like to something, this is going to be where we have the baseline of certain things, we compare the actuals of certain things to them, and we know if we're on track or not. Okay, let me stay on top of my earned value, talking about measurement there. Now, principles, doing good on questions so far. Awesome movie, I agree. So principles. Okay, I'm not going to read that list to you. I'm just going to go through the slides that follow and talk about what each of those represent. I know week before last, Alfredo and I had a video on YouTube going as background noise where somebody was spending an hour talking about a fraction of this list. And after about, 10 minutes in, I said, are they just trying to fill a time box or something like that? Because it seemed like they were just beating it to death. These principles, there's a reason that part of the Pmbok guide is 67 pages, and the other is and the performance domains and the rest of it is 270 some pages. Because there's just not a lot to say about these. I mean, if you get it, you get it type thing. So let's look at the first one here, stewardship. Treat others like you'd like to be treated. If they give you something, take good care of it. It's like when we go out and do classes for companies, I'll tell my point of contact, you don't need to worry about me spending your money wild. If there's a microwave in the hotel room and I can buy a pizza, I'll order a large one night and I'll eat it 2 nights in a row, because I'll be more frugal with your money than I will with mine. And I'm pretty frugal with mine. That's stewardship. If they put their trust in you to deliver the results of the project, be aware they're putting their trust in you. Produce, and take that respect seriously. Take that trust seriously that they're putting in you. Now the team, respect and accountability. 2 weeks ago at PMI Dallas, we had Lee Lambert come in. He was the godfather of the PMP. He said he was on the team that helped actually name the thing. And if I remember right, somebody asked him a question: do you know a way to measure accountability, or team accountability? I think that was the question, or if that wasn't it, that was approximately it. And I don't know that he had just a real quantitative answer. It wasn't like A plus B is C if he did have an answer. But when we think about, respect and accountability, team members holding each other accountable, I do remember his answer gave me some stuff to think about how people interact with each other. And that's that principle here. It's what does the culture of the team look like? How do we treat each other? How do we hold each other, accountable to what we are trying to do and get done? And that's a key piece there. Yeah, there was that phrase, oh, I think it was from that movie New Jack City back in the 90s or something. Am I not my brother's keeper? Well, you could say that's a team principle. Am I not my brother's keeper? Am I not my teammate's keeper? Do I not look out for them? Do they not look out for me? And if we all look out for each other with a common shared vision, theoretically, we should produce what we need to. Now, stakeholders, yeah. Being sensitive to the stakeholders, being sensitive to what they're trying to get out of things, being timely with how you involve and engage them. And, one word I like to use when I give presentations on stakeholders, I like to use the word sustained. Because it's not just I'm setting expectations, but we're doing a sustained engagement of the stakeholders on this project. It's not just getting started, it's not just in the middle, it's not just at the end, and how we engage them might evolve as necessary on the project. It's kind of like being a parent. If somebody said, how do you treat your kids? I'm going to quote the great industrial psychologist Jimmy Johnson. He said, somebody asked him, how do you treat your players? And he said, I treat them all the same. And he goes, and the reporter said, what do you mean? He said, I treat them like they need to be treated. Now, that guy had an industrial psychology degree for what it's worth, and he's in the College Football Hall of Fame as a player, College Football Hall of Fame as a coach, NFL Hall of Fame as a coach, Broadcast Hall of Fame as an announcer. So if that dude told me water was solid, I would kind of say, I'm listening, please explain a little more, even though it goes against everything I've heard my whole life. So, but that, again, that sustained engagement. Value. Now that goes back to that delivery. If you're not producing something of value, why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? If it doesn't add value, get it out of there. That's the bottom line. Some of you had seen our old office here in the Dallas, Texas area. It was about 2.5 times what we needed. We moved into a tech suite here where we got parking right out front. Open the door, we're in our front lobby. I got my studio. I got a little mini warehouse in back for printing and inventory. And man, it's a very value focused layout for what we need, for example. Now, systems thinking. This is an interesting one. Somebody could go, well, I build bridges, or I design buildings, or I teach elementary school. Why do I need to know about systems thinking? Everything is a system. How people interact with each other, how pieces interact with each other, how things that consist of multiple pieces. So the better understanding you have about how all those pieces interact and fit together, you'll be able to have a better feel for things as a project manager. Now, I'm going to say this as well. If you're wanting to evolve your career into product ownership or program or portfolio management, the better you get at systems thinking, the more likely you will be able to elevate yourself, because you will be looking more at, here is a program consisting of multiple interrelated projects. Here's a portfolio. I run a portfolio. What kind of market does it operate in? Things of that nature. Systems thinking. Leadership, people stepping up, doing what's needed. Management is organization. Leadership is getting people excited, motivated, influenced to be able to do what's needed to get the job done. And so, somebody, like I heard a former Dallas Cowboy once say about Dak Prescott, he goes, I'd run through a brick wall for that guy. And he goes, Tony Romo was eating at a restaurant when I was on the same team as him. He didn't come over and say hi to me and my wife, and I didn't go over and say hi to him before we left. But Dak Prescott, I'd run through a brick wall for that guy. Now, I'm not saying one's a bad leader and the other's good, but I can say I read a lot of stories about how Dak Prescott of the Cowboys really tries to focus on making a connection to every team member, and what have you. And that's a lot of leadership. Again, sustained team engagement. Tailoring, we've talked about already. Remember, that final bullet point there, tailoring can be iterative, so you can build on it. You might say we're gonna be a little more predictive and then get a little more adaptive, maybe get a little more adaptive and be a little more evolve into being a little more predictive as we learn more. You can do what's necessary there. And then quality, this is, whether it's the process, product, the department, division, but everything you do, you're trying to incorporate quality into. And you might go, does that sync up with that performance domain delivery? I could go there, but I could also say the development approach and life cycle could be influenced by how much you know about your ability to deliver quality. In other words, if it's kind of vague about how you're going to do it, you might end up being more adaptive than predictive. Lesson learned, Alfredo. My phone goes to sleep, so I can't keep track of the timer. But okay, so I want to stay on top of everybody's time here to be respectful. Complexity. So that goes back to that systems thinking, if you will. How, well, partially, I should say. But when we think about things interacting together, interacting with each other, or it could simply be one thing itself. How complex does it need to be? I was in a rock and roll band in Kansas called Crosswind. We backed our school bus up to a place to play. That small town went from population 500 to maybe 1,500 that night. We were pretty popular. That was a pretty simple situation. 6 years in a row, we were finalists for the Kansas Music Hall of Fame. We couldn't get criteria for what it took to get in. The 6th year in a row, it took 6 years, we finally did it, but that was pretty complex, and we go into the Kansas Music Hall of Fame this year. So, understanding the complexity of something you're working with, whether it's people, groups of people, a systems, some sort of regulatory type thing. We've got some trainers, here, and like I know, for example, if you guys want to cut books into your classes, it's a lot easier in the summer, spring and summer, because fall is when the cycles start, for example. And some might say, well, that sounds pretty simple. Well, that sounds pretty simple if you do it in the spring or summer, but try it in the fall. It's not that easy. Now, the risk principle. I don't know that I have a lot more to say about this than, other than what I said about uncertainty. We recognize uncertainty. We recognize that adaptability helps minimize risk because, we expect uncertainty. Change management can factor into that as well. So especially if you're more predictive and changes happen, you're going to be focusing more on dealing with change management. Then adaptability and resilience, this is just sticking to it. You deal with what comes at you. I don't know if Mike Tyson actually said this, but I've heard him quoted as saying this: everybody has a plan until you get hit in the face. And well, if you're Mike Tyson, a boxer in his prime, and he hits you in the face, if you're still standing up, you're probably pretty fortunate. But adaptability and resilience, being flexible and then sticking to it. Some call it the grind, but just not quitting. Change management. I know one of our trainers, Dr. Greg Shetler, he's like, I am so happy to see they finally started recognizing change management a lot more than they have in the past. Yeah, it is what it is. The more adaptive, it is put on the list, the more predictive, we're going to be dealing with a lot of change requests. Now, the value delivery system, those that deal in strategic planning, 3 to 5 years down the road, where are we trying to go? That value delivering system is key there because it lets us look 3 to 5 years down the road and ensure that the portfolios are doing the right work. The programs and projects are delivering the right benefits and results, not just getting the tasks done. And then operations, like the greatness of Denise Nichols, our operations and GM person, can focus on the daily running of the business. Now we're getting near the end here. Standards Plus. It is a digital platform. If you are a PMI member, this is one of the things you have access to. I'm not going to say it's free because you have to be a member to be able to access it for free, and membership costs. It's the value is good in my opinion, but you can also subscribe to it. I think it's approximately $5 a month, but don't quote me on that. But they have a variety of, it's basically a digital platform you log on to at pmi.org, and they've chopped up Pmbok Guide 6th edition and the various other standards they have. So like it might be like, here's the charter data flow diagram, here's the charter content, things like that. They've interviewed people like me as far as, challenges in the workplace on this subject, that subject. Like they'll ask me some questions and, record my answers and what have you. They have case studies out there. It's a really nice setup. The only thing I would say that creates a challenge is kind of like on a contact on your phone. If you don't remember the exact name, like you're thinking my kid's algebra teacher, and you're going, if you didn't make a contact of Nikki's algebra teacher in the subject, you're going, what was the name? So you might be going, well, my workplace calls it a whatever, but PMI doesn't. What your workplace calls is probably not going to show up when you search. So that's about the only negative I've seen so far with it, is you got to kind of know what you're looking for. Okay, doing good on question. Okay, it's where the jigsaw puzzle comes together with the framework. Yes. Okay, so let's see, that is, okay, now CAPM exam updates. So PMI has a new exam content outline that they have made available on their website, and I did receive an email from them the other day as well, acknowledging that it was out there. And they are saying in October 22, they will have a new CAPM exam that will be decoupled. That's Sierra, who's in charge of credentials at PMI, decoupled from the Pmbok Guide. And so it's supposed to include adaptive, prescriptive, or predictive, and hybrid frameworks and business analysis. Now, in 2017, I was in Florida helping PMI update the current exam content outline for the CAPM exam. And back then, they said they wanted this next one to be more of a gateway type mechanism. Like you go in with CAPM, and then you could either go Agile, you could go PMP, you could go BA. And so this does align with what they said 4 or 5 years ago. And if we think about it, the last time they updated the exam content outline for the CAPM was 2017. What's 4 or 5 years later? Right now. And they're saying later this year. So now, I'm a little hesitant to say that I think it's going to cut over by then, because they've had a lot of things on their plate. But, worst case, they're putting a stake in the ground and trying to hit it. Now, they also did announce with the retirement of 6th edition Pmbok Guide, a retirement being when they sell out of what's been printed, they're not printing more. And at some point, they're going to decommission the digital versions, is my understanding, unless there's previous licensing agreements. But they did announce that by the end of the year, they expect to announce, and that's right, I'm doing a double announce. They expect by the end of the year that they will announce some sort of a predictive standard. They called it prescriptive standard, that would incorporate knowledge areas, process groups, processes, and ITOs. And they are still working on the appropriate format, how quickly it could be done, price, market, what have you. Now, don't translate that as they're going to start incorporating that stuff again. In my opinion, what that means is they probably have heard a lot of people freak out about, oh my God, the 7th edition is a mass change. And, well, we had all this stuff from 6th edition, and we're not going to have anything ongoing with that. So why don't we just take some of that stuff, have volunteers get together under our direction and repackage it to a new standard, and then anything we sell, we make more money, and members get access to as it is. Okay, that's not a bad thing. Just don't think that you need to get that standard to sit for a test anytime soon unless it's specifically based on that standard. Okay, let's see. Any final questions? Now, before you drop off, I do have a how to get PDUs and all that. So, or how to register the PDU. So don't drop off until then, if you will. Any final questions? And I will be on until the last person drops off, even if it's some relatively extreme, give me a moment to address it the best I can type question. Let's see. Okay. So so this is today. So we will be, we don't have another one of these scheduled, but our next webinar is going to be on uncertainty and risk management as aligned with the 7th edition Pmbok guide. We don't have a date yet for it because I'm getting ready to be on the road with some Scrum things. I would anticipate it's going to be somewhere around mid-June. So what we will do is we'll push out email to you guys, and when the registration for that is open, and these have been filling up. So, but again, uncertainty and risk management as aligned with 7th edition Pmbok guide. What does this mean for the folks that are already certified and having done and have been doing PM work for years? Okay. So if you're already certified, it doesn't mean anything. Just keep up your PDUs. So you don't have to get some refresher or, anything like that. Just keep your PDUs up, and you can get them at PMI chapter meetings, self-study, PDU refreshers like we have, or the 2-day thing that you saw that we were promoting. Anything that gets you PDUs, you just keep your PDUs up and you're good there. For my next PMP exam, do I focus more on Pmbok Guide 6th or 7th? Now, Lacan, I'm not sure if that means you haven't taken the exam yet or passed it yet or what have you. In my opinion, you don't need a Pmbok Guide, either of them, to pass the test. In fact, I've had some people pass the test in the last month that purchased 6 and 7 just because they wanted to be safe. And I think both of them basically, one said it added no value, and the other said, basically, I just stopped looking at it because it gave me a headache. So if you're using, for example, like the Crosswind Bootcamp manual, it gets you what you need. Because again, the Pmbok guide is not meant for the PMP exam, even though some things could be referenced from it. It's meant to show ways that you could do project management. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so pmi.org, yeah, keep your PDUs current. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Let me see. Local chapter. Yeah, local chapters are a great source of PDUs. Yeah, in fact, volunteering, you can get so many PDUs that way as well. And it's a great networking opportunity to be around people and know what's going on in your industry as well. Let's see. Can I repeat when the new test will be implemented with Pmbok 7? I'm going to quote Sierra. Pmbok Guide 7 has been decoupled from the PMP exam. So could they, the way they create questions are like this. They have a stack of books in a room with people that are not like me because I do things like this. So they have a stack of books in a room with volunteers that don't write books and train people. We can't do that. We can't contribute to those, and we can't help create real test questions because it's a conflict of interest. But somebody, if they look up like in the back of the Pmbok guide and they see process groups initiating through closing, and they chose to write a question that says, you're doing a prescriptive project environment. Which of the following models are you likely to use? And then they say the correct answer is initiating through closing. And then now I'm guessing here based on talking to Sierra, they would likely document where they found that, and then an independent person, not them, would look and say, yes, that is, I see on this book, in this page, it is here. Thus, somebody didn't just create it out of nowhere, and it's not in print somewhere. So in a case like that, could something in 7th edition be on the exam? It could. But if you look in the back of 7th edition Pmbok guide, if you're familiar with 6 at all, the various management plans, the various, issue log, assumption log, change log, the stakeholder register, risk register, all those various documents that those 49 processes created, they're listed in the back of the Pmbok Guide 7 in methods, models, and artifacts. Actually, they're the artifacts. So, if somebody was writing a question about a scope statement, okay, now instead of being in the defined scope part of Pmbok Guide 6, it's now in the artifacts part of Pmbok Guide 7. Now, does that mean that's going to tell you enough in Pmbok Guide 7 to help you understand what a scope statement does for the exam? I would think not, because that's going to have even less details about it than it did in the 6th edition. So in my opinion, the best thing you could do 6 or 7 is just make sure you have a good current exam prep book. And I'm biased, but the 46 I've written since 2004, they've been as complete and whole as I know how to write them, to where you don't need a Pmbok guide at all. So hopefully that helped with that question. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see. Any other questions at this point, anyone? Again, I'll be here until the last person drops off, but this is how you register PDUs. Now, let me clarify. Point number 3.2, course, Pmbok Guide 7 Overview and 2022 Pmp Exam Impact. Note, you will not see this webinar listed in the drop-down menu. Crosswind cannot justify paying PMI almost $10,000 a year and $99 a student to simply have any class that we would do listed on that site. That technically gets us other things, but you got to buy those other things to have things like this listed there. So follow these steps, and this will get you the PDUs registered. I suggest you take a picture of this screen right now, and you'll have the step-by-step. And Pat, you might know, for example, they renamed the Pdu categories, but at least as of last week when we looked, they had renamed them, but when you looked at assigning them to an event, they still had the old name. So I don't know, have you seen that they've updated that part of them or not? Your lips are moving, but I don't hear you.
Yeah, they said that they were just going to pull those things in to align them with the new one. But the new one, I think, only has two categories, education and something else. So I think we have to look at what the template for the report PDU says, fill it out according to that, and then see what happens.
Well, and this came directly from that template. What I'm referring to is 3.7, where it's the leadership, where it's the
technical leadership, strategic.
Yeah, the 3 subcategories. And because they had it like business acumen, way of working, and I forget what the other one was. And it was like, oh, the image is the same, they just renamed them. But then when you go to register it, they have the old names. So
yes,
yeah, okay.
I saw that last week, that they still had the old ones for those categories.
And that's an example of probably the PDU people made the adjustment. It just hasn't made it through to the website people yet, or that part of the website. Okay, well, let's see. We are almost done here. So you can get a free email tip of the day where you will get a question and term and definition sent to your inbox every day. If you aren't interested in this, but you know somebody that might be studying for the PMP or CAPM exam, feel free to share this link to them. Alfredo, or you have that where you can put it in chat? And again, you can unsubscribe at any time, but I've been told by a lot of people over the years, it's a nice daily accountability buddy. You know, even if you're just going, what do I think about this? Ooh, I need some studying, or I need to do some studying, or hey, I got that right. Project Management Training Alliance is the only global nonprofit organization that represents the project management training community. So when it comes to training, professional development, coaching, etc., if you want the gold standard, you want a PMTA certified training provider. Now that said, trademarks and copyrights, respectively, PMTA and CTP are registered marks of the Project Management Training Alliance. PMI, PMP, Pmbok, etc. are registered trademarks of the Project Management Institute Incorporated.